Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at the units in Star Survivors, and the one of the essential factors of thinking about how units work and how units are balanced is that in order to get any value out of a unit, you need to evolve it. Um, except the medevac, which does not need to evolve. So a lot of units are going to be sort of informed by what the good passives are. Um, every unit has a certain baseline it's capable of once it's evolved, and also a base like a higher end that it achieves when it has a lot of synergies. And so the power of a unit and its placement on the tier list is going to be like, what does the unit accomplish? How good is the unit accomplishing that without help? How much help does it need to accomplish more, right? Um, and so, first unit we're looking at is the S tier tank. The S tier tank. I'm just saying that's part of its name now. The tank is an extremely good unit. Its main downside is that you don't get a lot of them, and so all it really needs is resocialization in order to bring its tank count at maximum from 3 to 5, and it needs either its synergy passive or medevac in order to evolve. I highly recommend using medevac to evolve it because, as I've discussed previously, range is a terrible, terrible passive. But the thing that makes tank so strong is that what it accomplishes is clearing out waves of armored targets, ultralisks, Kerrigans, hybrids. It can siege into bases. It's an excellent option for early game leveling. It can destroy side objectives. You can definitely exceed how much damage the tank can do. You don't need it for every build. I think it's really, really good because there's so many ways to build into it effectively. And it only needs, in my opinion, resoc in order to hit its high ends. After that, stim is gravy. Ordnance barely matters. Munitions doesn't matter. Smart servos is really, really good with it because it's attack speed. On the flip side, the Banshee is what the tank is really happy that it isn't. The Banshee has the current problem that it's basically a half Hellion, half tank. It's sort of generically good splash damage, but it needs, in order to really be effective, it needs stim, resocialization, stim, munitions, smart servos, and ordnance to really hit a point where it's actually doing its job correctly. It's not as effective at dealing with light units at the lower synergies than Hellion is. It's not as effective at dealing with armored targets as the tank is. And when you're using all of those upgrades together, you still also want air coverage, and Marines do that general damage better. So it's not that Banshees are bad. It's not that you don't ever want to use Banshees. It's that there's a lot of other ways to do what Banshees do. And they need a lot of support to really get high value. Now, as on the flip side, if you just need an extra evolution to round stuff out, you can just take Cellular Reactor, that's its synergy, and Cellular Reactor is a great passive, so you're not really upset if you have to take Banshee, but a lot of the times it's better not to fill in that extra unit slot, even if you have the option to take a good unit, right? Like, you can play Warfield with just like Hellion, Tank, Viking, and not even take Ghosts, even though Ghosts are so strong. Which we'll get to. But the idea is more that it's hard to take Banshee and then say, this was a good decision that I'm getting the most out of, which is why I have it down fairly low. But it is fun. And it has the other benefit that it is an air unit. So if you want to minimize the number of caches you have, you can play Banshee Viking Swan. You can play Banshee Viking BC Tychus. You can play Banshee Viking Liberator. It's an odd composition, but it works. If your option is between Banshee and a factory unit and you have bio otherwise, maybe you take Banshee so that you don't stretch yourself too thin. There's a lot of different ways to play the game. Banshee, it does fit. I just think there's more often than not different ways to use it. Ghost is an extremely powerful unit that targets down the highest health targets in its vicinity. It needs very little to do its job well. I think it doesn't even need resocialization. I think baseline evolved ghosts with either medevac or vision do their job. They do benefit from every damage passive except munitions. And you'll feel that depending on how much you want to emphasize ghosts. Ghosts give back what you give them, but their baseline is enough, in my opinion. with the support, they can handle air by themselves. Without, you'll need a second air unit. With support, they can deal with all high health targets by themselves. If not, you'll need like tanks or marauders or something. But because they're like really efficient, better than jacks of all trades, they cover light units, they cover ground, like all sorts of stuff. They are only like meh against buildings, but they'll still do enough damage. That makes Ghosts just a really, really easy pick for a lot of builds. So Vikings are splash anti-air, and they are by themselves without any support extremely, extremely effective against all air units. You can have no other upgrades affecting Vikings, and Vikings will still make you not care about air that game. Because of that, I almost considered putting them in S tier, and I do think you can make the argument that they're in S tier, and I won't argue with you. Like reasonably, like obviously I'll chat, but I think Vikings have the main downside that even though they target air units, they target obelisks, they target Amon, they really hamper your early game. Even though it only takes 6 levels to evolve them, if you take a Viking early, you're really slowing down your build. They're a starport unit, so if you're playing into factory units or playing into bio units, you maybe don't want to stretch yourself into starport if you can avoid it, because that pollutes the black market selection. But they are very, very strong at what they do, and they don't need any help to do it. If you give them the help to do it, if you give them resocialization, if you give them stim and ordnance, you'll see the returns. Air will just disappear even faster. But they do like splash as well as really high direct damage, so they're very effective against air. The only reason they're in A tier, in my opinion, is because they're just complete dead weight in the early game. You don't want chest points leveling them up. You don't want to have them even like before, like around 20 minutes, like T-minus 20 minutes. Having them before then can slow you down a lot. But again, if you have the speed, otherwise you can make up for it, and you'll have a easier anti-air early game. Anti-air late game. The other downside is that other units are good against air. So even though Vikings are great against air, you don't necessarily need them. And if you have other anti-air options, Vikings become redundant, and you start having other issues, right? So you got to be careful. But because you're very often going to take afterburners, Vikings are going to do their job. But yeah, very good unit. Hellion, here, I think. So Hellions, on the face of it, I think would be a reasonable thing to declare maybe a B or a low A tier unit. But there's a couple of things accelerating Hellions into the S tier. Number one, they don't cost much to evolve. They only cost 6 points to evolve and 6 points to finish, so they're even more point efficient than the Vikings. Light units matter a lot early game, and Hellions help you a lot against those early units, particularly because they evolve so quickly. They synergize with Jorium, like that's their evolution synergy, and Jorium early game along with Hellions means that you're clearing everything and you're getting more money. It pays for itself and speeds you up really fast. In the late game, there's massive hordes of light units that are very scary for any other unit to deal with. Hellions wipe the floor with them without major investment. With some investment, Hellions don't get much stronger, but they still cover themselves pretty well. I think the main passive that helps them is resocialization. And again, the synergy between these 3 units in particular and resocialization, Hellions actually, you get 2 more units per level of resocialization because you get an extra ring with it. So it's those 3 units are so good because resocialization exists. Resocialization is good because those units exist. They're informing each other. And yeah, I think there's more times where you want Hellion than you want Ghost. I don't think there's more times you want Hellion than you want Tank. Tank is really, really fun to play into, but there's a lot of times where if you're playing with a mount build, with mines, with BCs, you'll have Hellions anyway. Whereas with tanks, maybe not, because the mount can do the job of the tank. The other incidental benefit is that they also give you the black market money. So if you don't want to hunt down evolutions all day, or you don't want to hunt down bounties all day, you can still get a fair bit of cash with the Hellions. They won't push you into 7 unless you're playing on a gigantic map, but they'll still help you get that 6 with Medevac or that 5 without it really reliably. So fire bats, I'm not sure quite how to weigh them. They're not bad. I think I might even put them in B tier. Yeah, we're putting them in B tier. So fire bats they're a lot heavier than Hellions, right? Their synergy passive isn't as good. They're a lot closer to you. Uh, they're not. If you compare them to the Hellion, you're probably thinking, "Oh, actually, they're F tier. We never take them." Firebats are a different unit. The thing that Firebats do extremely well is percent damage. So, in the same way that Hero Nova can target everything down, Firebats, when you have a decent circle of them, that again, you only really need resocialization to get that decent circle, and even then, you don't even need it. By themselves, they will kill any unit in the game in 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time. But if you have armor and health, you can walk up to stuff a lot safer, and you can like reliably burn down Amon. You can burn down side objectives. You can burn down artifact faults. You can burn down hives. You can burn down Tarrasques and such. Obviously, you got to be a little careful, but because of the way that their percent damage stacks, they get to the point where they're dealing 60% of an enemy's health in 2 seconds, and then they do the last bit in the second right after that. So with Medevac, you can fly over targets, attack them all with percent health, and then walk around them. With Liberator, you can have the Liberator clear out all the chaff and have the Firebat actually kill the big stuff. That doesn't seem like how you'd use those 2 units together, but in practice it works a lot. Again, there is the slight risk that because you need to be slightly in danger for the Firebats to do something, it feels iffy, but I find them very effective. Goliaths, this UI actually has 2 Goliaths. Goliaths I'm putting slightly above Vikings. Goliaths by themselves, with just a smidge of support, handle all air for you. Their special ability, where their overkill missiles, as in the missiles that were targeting a unit that died, will then target something else, really helps them clear air a lot faster. They're great against Mutalisks because of that. They're great against the Leviathan wave. They're great against the Corruptor Seeker missile post-game Amon things. But they also have a really good single target against shards and against Amon and against some side objectives. So they have a lot of the benefits of Vikings. They're a little more expensive to set up, but I think the reason they win out is that they're much, much better early game. Vikings are Goliaths with Resoc will clear the ground for you really, really well. They're not a great ground clear late game, but that mid game where you're like not yet fully built and you need that like little bit of extra ground cover, Goliaths will give you where Vikings won't. The other benefit is that if you want to manipulate the black market, tank, Hellion, both factory, you take Goliath and you finish that. So you're going a full mech build. You're only going to get 1 building in that final tier. Now, if you're not really supporting them, I think a lot of the times you'll want Goliath Ghost together to cover the air. You don't really want to go Goliath Viking as much, but Goliath Ghost together without support or Goliath by itself with passive support can do phenomenally. Marauders are, again, a difficult unit to rank. I think they also land in B tier. Marauders do really good anti-armored single target. They do a big slow, and their big benefit is that slow. In the same way that speeding you up makes you safer, slowing enemies down makes you safer. In my experience, and I showed this in the Raynor video, the best way to use Marauders is to evolve them slightly later and use them to then cover you against Kerrigan Zagara hybrid Tarrasques. Do they still Tarrasques? I'm not even sure. Brutalisks. And having Marauders, they're not going to deal an insane amount of damage for you, but they are going to give you that like so much more room to play around and move around in that space. I think you can play Hero Swan with like Marine Marauder or even Marauder Hellion really effectively. I think you can play a lot of different builds with Marauders slipped in there with Ordnance. And any build that's considering using Ordnance and Stim together, so like any build that wants to like really say, I'm not worried about bounties, I want to put all my levels into my units and I want them to just be good, Marauders are going to shine in those comps. Tychus obviously starts with Ordnance, so you're always like thinking, maybe I want this to help with Tychus. Tychus has the grenade crowd control, so there's like overlapping ideas there that work really well. Battlecruiser, I'm going to put at the top of B tier. Battlecruiser is a sort of, it's the heaviest unit in the game. It takes a lot of effort to get value out of it. You need to evolve up to the Gorgon twice, you need 2 passives, and then what you get, it needs a lot of support. You need munitions, you need stim, you need ordnance, you need smart servos. You don't need resocialization, so you save on that. But if you're emphasizing a battlecruiser build, I've already named off 5 passives you need, right? So you're playing this on like Swan or on Tychus most of the time. Maybe you like rebalance it a little bit to be able to play it on Nova or Raynor. It can work. It can solo the game. It is a feature complete unit because it splashes everything, but it is so heavy that it is hard to justify it over stuff that lets you play faster or in more varied ways or with less support. If you've never killed Amon before and you want to know like what do I do to like get to Amon, just go battlecruiser. But if you're trying to really say I want the most power, the battlecruiser doesn't get you there. The Liberator, I'm going to say, is C tier. Now, the battlecruiser and the Liberator and the Mine are all suffering from one major issue, which is that the medevac is really, really good. I'll get to that. But because the mount slot is sort of reserved, the Liberator doesn't get a lot of value. The Liberator is synergized with a pretty bad passive, and yeah, the tank is synergized with the worst passive, but the tank its actual effect is really, really good. The Liberator takes a lot of finesse to get value out of. You have to like move really effectively. You have to really manage its cooldown, but you can play like a survival bulwark style with it, as I showed with linebacker Tychus. It's a lot of fun. It's the best unit, like the before evolve versus after evolve change on Liberator specifically, going from hitting one target to hitting everything in the circle, is the biggest change any unit receives. Big fan of it. I enjoy playing with it. It's a really good unit, but I can't like reasonably put it above anything else. Mine is in a similar boat right now, even a little worse. Mine's major issue is that it needs munitions but doesn't get any value out of it. It needs stim because it needs to attack more often. It needs servos for the same reason. But by itself, it doesn't solve any problems so much as it like adds effectiveness to your ability to solve problems. So you need a well-rounded comp on top of mines in order to do well with them. Needing to babysit a unit that much takes effort. Having a negative early game is unfortunate. You know, at least the Viking at least respectfully does nothing for the first couple of hatches. But the Mine, you experience a downside if it fires before it's evolved, because it destroys money. The flip side is that it will end up paying for itself and then some in the late game. The money factor for it is really, really good. If you play a build with a lot of movement speed with Widow Mine, you can like run around, detonate on a crowd, take up all the money, run somewhere else, and the total multiplication for money there is 50%. 50% when you're getting 5 times for each multiplied money is like 2-3 times the amount of money you're getting. So it is really effective. You can get a lot of value out of it. But the main thing's pushing it back is that it does require a lot of passives to do well. And it is a mount, so it's competing with other mounts. So for a while, I was pretty down on the Marine evolutions, but I think in the recent patch, I'm actually pretty happy about them. So War Pigs, they need a lot of support to get high-end value, right? So what is their effective use case? It's to damage everything a little bit. It's sort of the same thing Banshees are doing. And if you need an early game unit, War Pigs will succeed spectacularly, or Marines will succeed spectacularly. With Raynor, you're always going to have stim, so you can always think, maybe I want Marines to just make my early game easier. He has a lot of unit slots, you can waste one like that. But the War Pigs, in order to get real value out of them, you need stim and ordnance and munitions together, because you want that flat damage getting increased and hitting more. This all like gives it like nearly triple damage, I think. I'm not going to do the math on while recording, but it's really important to really get the mileage out of the War Pigs. If you can afford all of those together, if you're not playing a hero build, if you're not playing like a particularly niche style, you can get a lot of value out of the War Pigs. And I think that if you can also get the flat damage black market and the barracks black market, Marines are actually outright carrying you at that point. They can clear all of the hybrid waves by themselves. They'll tickle down the shards and the the Thrashers and Amon, but you'll be safe while you're doing it because they do have a pretty good range. They're like pretty far away from you. So Marines are very effective comp filler a lot of the time, and they're very effective if you give them the care that they need. Troopers, I think, are slightly worse, not because the unit itself is worse, the unit is better, but you now also need resocialization to get the evolution, but you still want stim, munitions, and ordnance. I think the high end on troopers is higher, but the ability to like just weave into your comp is worse, even though, if you're having troopers, if you have Marines and resoc, you can just grab troopers for free, but they're not going to be doing much for you. Whereas war pigs can do more for you easier. It's like troopers are better if like you barely care about your Marine. War pigs are better if you care a little bit about your Marine, and then troopers are better again if you care a lot. But I think the moments where you care a little bit are slightly more common, so I'm putting it slightly higher. There's two Goliaths in the COI. I'm not sure why. The Spec Ops Battlecruiser is the worst unit, not because it's actively bad. It's not like a case of range where most of the time when you take it, it's negative. It's that there's never a good reason to build a build around the Spec Ops Battlecruiser and not evolve it to the Gorgon. This is the weight the Gorgon has to deal with, right? So it's not a bad unit. Obviously, you want to evolve it as fast as possible, but the reason you want to evolve it is to get to the Gorgon. Big fan of the Battlecruiser setup in general. It's a neat thing, but in terms of like setting up how the units and the builds work in this game, it sort of has to be the worst unit just because the Gorgon is so good. And then the Medivac is at the top of S tier. Genuinely could deserve a tier of its own. The Medivac allows you to design your comps without worrying about what passives you're taking. Because the Medivac's passive ability means that your evolutions evolve without passives. Without needing a relevant passive. So even though the tank has been severely nerfed by about like 45% total attack speed, it doesn't matter because you can now evolve it without hampering yourself with range. The Hellion doesn't get much from it, but the Ghost, now you get vision from Medivac and you don't need to take vision to evolve the Ghost, so you're moving a passive slot to the unit slot. Because of how powerful passives are, units tend to be less important than passives. So having a unit that does the job of so many passives is really, really good. Again, Fire Bats even benefit a lot because armor is not that valuable, and the benefit of being able to like move Fire Bats quickly over an area and dot everything with the percent damage is really, really strong. And it's that movement, it's that incidental healing. There's not a lot of healing in the game, so any healing is good. The regen passive at the black market is really strong. So even though we're not, we're not getting an insane amount of healing out of it, there's nothing it's competing with. It's in there by itself. Everything that Medivac does is really strong. So I'm very confident to call it that top tier. I think every build has to at least think, do we want Medivac? And there has to be a really clear reason why not. Hero Swan, for example, can't really fit it in because otherwise your unit coverage is doing almost nothing. But even then, I think you can play like Hero Swan, which is Trooper Medivac or Hellion Medivac. I think that obviously any mount build can't take Medivac, but that's more a downside of the mount build than an upside of the Medivac. So that's a downside of taking a mount instead of the Medivac. And for everything else, it really helps. And again, because it's a mount, but you need non-mount DPS, that makes resocialization stronger. It makes just the damage synergies and speed synergies stronger. It's just a fantastic unit. Hope you enjoyed. This is prone to change, obviously, from my opinion, but also to balance and to new content. This list didn't look like this before the Medivac got added. So, this is very subject to change, but I hope the logic that I'm using to talk about like why you want a unit and what it does is helpful for you in designing your own builds. Enjoy.